What is up, guys? Welcome to a new video. So a few days ago we did this video on how good you are as an AD carry, right? And most of the questions I got from that were about lane control and what it actually looks like and stuff. So I thought I'd update this guide for season 7. This stuff can be used like in any single lane, but it's easier to explain if we look at bot lane. To start with, we'll go over freezing first, but pushing and slow pushing timestamps will be below as well. I definitely recommend, by the way, you at least watch the slow pushing section. It's not something I've talked about before, and that is the easiest way to win a game from 25 minutes onwards that nobody uses. Just before we start, by the way, if you play on NA for League or Overwatch, definitely check out Haste in the description. I know there's some skeptical stuff around this, but it's actually super smart. You connect to their server directly on their lines, which are more stable and should be faster as well. But more importantly, if one of them dies, then you immediately connect to another one of theirs, whereas if you use your normal connection and it goes, you spike and lag out. Definitely check it out. It worked for me. It's worked for a lot of you guys so far too. But actually as well, let's give away $25 of RP in the video as a thank you for supporting my sponsors on the channel. Just leave a comment and like the video if you end up enjoying it. We're starting with freezing, and basically it's when you hold the wave in a certain position so you can stop the enemy from reaching that wave and getting CS and gold. That is kind of it in a nutshell. This used to be how you'd win a game in early seasons of League, like legit. It was so frustrating to play against. The enemy would get a lead, they'd freeze, they deny you experience and gold, and you would just be screwed. They have changed experience range and stuff so you can still get that at least, but it's still a really good way to beat better players. Like, you don't need better mechanics to do this, you just need to use your brain. A few things before we start. This works much better when you're stronger, so you can actually deny and stop them hitting the wave, but you can use this to stop losing as hard as well, and it also doesn't work very well against long range wave clear, which is kind of obvious. Now, why would you actually want to do this in the first place, right? The first thing is you'd actually get more kills in the lane phase. If you freeze, they have to come further down the lane to get to the wave, away from their tower, and that's when you can fight and chase them if you're stronger. You also get a bigger lead from this, so like instead of just being stronger but both of you getting gold, you can farm and they can't, so your gold lead is actually growing in the game. There's also really little risk, like you're getting that bigger lead that we talked about from a CS lead, right? Not from fighting, so it can't really go wrong. You also tilt the enemy. This is one of the best ways to tilt an opponent. Like, it's so hard to play against. They're gonna get this feeling of being useless. They're gonna panic, like worry if they get no gold, and they're gonna tilt. Like, the enemy has no gold or CS and there's nothing they can do about it. They will probably suicide out frustration, like walking forward. It also is gonna help you stop dying to ganks. You freeze closer to your tower and it's much harder to gank you, and finally you don't fall as far behind. If you do get behind, proper wave control can actually mean you're able to CS and not die as much anymore. So how do we actually want to do this then? First thing is you want to learn to mirror your opponent. The first basic of lane control really is this. This is how you get the wave to do what you want with the enemy in lane as well. Any idiot can freeze in a bot game. It's much harder in an actual game. To keep the wave where it is, firstly you mirror the opponent, okay? If they only last hit, then so do you. If they auto attack, you auto attack. If they use an ability, you have to equal out that damage. There is no point setting up a freeze if you let them break it, so you always want to watch what they are doing, right? If you don't want to push the wave, then only mirror your opponent. If you do want to push, then you dictate the pace and you auto attack more than your opponent. If you want to bring the wave closer to your tower, then you've got to let them auto more. That is the first thing about a freeze that most people actually don't understand. Remember, you want to freeze closer to your tower. As we said, that extends the lane, that makes them come further away from their tower, which allows you to zone, deny gold, and also fight them. Now, to do that, you almost always have to let them get some CS to deny them more, if that makes sense. Like, it's not going to push towards you and near your tower where you can freeze unless you let them auto attack the wave first. There is kind of like an alternative. You can push it into tower and the tower does it for you, but that is a lot harder. So to build a freeze then, very basically, you let them push a little bit to start with, get more minions than you have so it gets towards your half of the lane. Number two, when it's getting to where you want to freeze, you start to thin out their wave a little bit more so it doesn't hit your tower. That means you fire an ability, but normally just auto attack to make the numbers a bit more equal, but they still have slightly more. Once the wave has equal minions or they have one or two more minions, you move up with your support to zone the enemy AD carry, and that is where you start to freeze. That is literally it. That is 3 steps to a basic freeze, and now there's 2 more to hold on to that freeze. You really want to last hit as late as possible to hold it for longer. So remember, you're still doing like 50 damage with an auto attack, for example, to CS that creep, right? Also remember, your new minion wave hits first because you're closer to your tower than the enemy tower now. So that means you do want to have slightly more enemy minions to keep the balance there. There are also a few things to keep in mind with this. So 1, keep it out of your tower range. Your tower will break your freeze. You may have to thin the wave to actually do this, so don't let it hit your tower if that's pushing it too much. You thin out a few caster minions which do more damage. Wave control really is a numbers game as to whether it pushes to you or to them, but in general, casters do more damage, so they push harder, and fighters take more damage. That means they absorb more. It kind of holds that freeze for a bit longer. They keep it in position. So basically, if you need to thin the wave, it's normally better to kill a caster minion than one of the front ones. The thing is with this though, just don't push the wave if you cannot contest it, right? If you're not stronger. Like if you're weaker and you push, you're letting them freeze it if they want to. It's kind of funny, but actually it's super hard to freeze a wave on your own. Like you'd have to use a tower, which is not easy to do. Most freezes actually happen because the enemy AD doesn't realize and he screws himself over by pushing it into you to freeze. So that is kind of the why, that is kind of the how, but now let's get into the when. Now freezing is all about the when and why parts really. It's not that hard to do it. So this is the applications of freezing basically. It's like looking at some useful examples to take into a game. Number one, if you're getting camped, it kind of sucks, right? But if you freeze it properly, you can actually protect yourself much more. You only have to worry about getting dove on the tower. You're going to want to keep that wave in this portion of the lane that I'm showing you on screen now. So you're closer to your tower, so the one, it makes it kind of hard to gank, I guess. Like the jungle will stay away more anyway. And number two, you'll be able to get back to your tower quickly if anything does go wrong. The second situation is actually fighting. So freezing, while kind of like a passive style, I guess, like your PvE, right? You're just like firing minions. It's actually best to use as an aggressive tool. You can use this to pick fights, to punish people, be able to engage properly. So you want to have the wave around here. Not as close to your tower this time, but in the middle or slightly towards your side, which extends the lane and allows you to zone, but also to chase them down if they come close. Similar to before, using your lead. So wave control is really good to get that gold or strength lead you have and extend it even further. There are two ways you can do this. Either you zone away and keep them from getting any CS, or you push and you punish if you have long range or high ranged abilities to poke with. The first is more like starving the enemy of gold, right? The second is more gold for them, but more gold for you as well with the tower gold and kills. If you want to do the first one to zone, you really want the wave in these two slots roughly, or to punish, you're going to want the wave further up around here. Finally, as a defensive tool then, if you're getting your ass pounded, you can try to freeze the wave to actually protect it. That was really bad choice of words. This is where mirroring comes in a bit more though. You mirror your opponent, you hold the wave where you are. In these two spots here, even on the tower, it's not terrible depending on who you're against, but have to remember that that tower will break any control you have and reset the lane or push to them. So pushing very quickly is like the second form of wave control that everyone really defaults to right now in Season 7. It's not always ideal, you shouldn't always do it, but it's the easiest form of control. It's a bit different though. You have tower pressure, which you can get that gold for your team. You have lane pressure, which means you can always roam first to fights. There is also a safety element to it, which sounds kind of weird because you're pushing, but the enemy will be concentrating on CS under tower rather than on you, so actually it's kind of safer to push. That is obviously until the enemy jungler comes, so that is the biggest downside obviously. This is where you really want to do both. That's kind of why I wanted to mention this in the video. Like the best of this will be freezing and pushing at different times in the same game. Freezing means you can starve the enemy gold and slowly increase your lead, right? It's a slower game, but it's much more safer and risk-free. You can get kills, but only if the enemy makes a mistake coming forward, which probably they actually will do, to be honest. When you see the enemy jungler top lane though, you can switch to pushing the wave in. Like now you know the danger part of pushing has gone. You can push, get tower damage, still deny farm because they'll miss someone under tower, and you maybe get some poke as well. When you combine both properly, you suddenly become a lot more deadly and also a lot safer as an AD carry in the lane phase, which I think is a big problem right now in Season 7. So finally then, slow pushing. This is not very complicated, but it is something everybody should be able to do because it legit turns a late game macro mess that is solo queue into something super easy to play. If you've ever had that problem of grouping but you're not really sure what to do, or just like an ARAM down mid with both teams, this kind of fixes that. Now a slow push is literally just that, right? It's side lanes that push slowly down the lane instead of spamming all your abilities and getting rid of all of the CS as fast as possible before returning to your team. How you do it is actually really simple. There are probably a ton of ways you can, but I like to leave one fighter and 2 caster minions alive on the enemy wave. That is going to mean 6 of yours versus their 3. So it will push, but it takes some more time now and the wave will build up to be a lot bigger. This does not work with tier 1 towers in the lane phase, by the way, only tier 2 and above, otherwise there is not enough time to build up that wave. There are a lot of reasons why this is so good, but I think there are 3 main ones. So 1, tower damage. You build up 3 waves at least. That's like 18 minions, and a cannon seriously hurts the tower. I reckon that's like half a tower's HP gone per push, and that's all for free, remember. You did nothing except slow push the lane in. Number 2, it gives yourself some more time. So if you push the wave really hard, the enemy AD will go and push it back and then regroup straight away before you can do anything. If you slow push, the wave builds up. You're already mid by the time that massive wave is going to hit the enemy tower, and if someone goes to farm it, it's now a 5v4. That is basically what this revolves around, right? By slow pushing, you create a lose-lose situation for the enemy team. They're either going to A, lose a ton of gold to the tower and take tower damage but stay as a team, or B, someone goes to farm it but they're now a 4v5 and they lose control. They get engaged on, or they lose an objective on the other side of the map. Slow pushing is very hard to play against, but it's very easy to do. That's kind of the best thing. Number 3 is less throws. It's a bit weird, but in my opinion, slow pushing actually makes your team throw less. You spend less time in the side lane anyway, normally bot bot lane. And if you do this properly, you'll always be getting towers for free, objectives, or uneven fights in your favor. This doesn't always work. I know teams are full of morons sometimes, but the point is it makes mid game a crap ton easier for very little work. If we take that bot lane example, then scenario 1, nobody goes to farm it on the enemy team, you deny that gold and you get gold from that tower for free. Scenario 2, which is more likely, the enemy AD leaves his team and he goes to farm it. You now have a 4v5, right? You can go to Baron, you can start that, you can go to Dragon if you slow push top lane. You could push a tower mid or top with numbers advantage or straight up engage, right? I hope you all found this useful. Let me know what you thought in the comments, but for now, as always, let's go to the robots.